Hey neighbors and my fellow holy smokers, this is Christian Smith. We're back for another episode of Holy Smoke, Cigars and Spirituality. Now listen, we're new, we're just getting started, so in some of these first episodes, we had some technical difficulties with the sound, but the content was just too great to not deliver it to you. So bear with us, we're going to get better as we go, but I promise you, this content is just otherworldly. This cast is brilliant. So call the friends and family, have them come around, start a discussion. By all means, light up a cigar, pour a drink, whatever works for you, and enjoy this installment of Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality. And I'll see you when this episode is over.
All right, you keep good.
So, we're back. Episode 3, Holy Smokes.
What episode is this?
Episode 3, Watch Your Mouth, Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality. As you can tell, we've already kind of gotten started. That's pretty much how this goes. We're here at Highland Cigar Lounge in Inman Park in Atlanta, Georgia. Shout out to our friends at Highland for hosting us and allowing us to be here.
Thank you, Highlands.
This is also the place where we meet every second Tuesday of the month at 5 p.m. for our in-person discussion. And you know, the podcast is just an extension of what we do on the second Tuesday of every month. So I'm really excited to have my friends here. My name is Christian Smith. I'm the heretic. I am the pastor of the faith community here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the leader of the Holy Smokes movement. And today, we're going to go ahead and get into these introductions so we can get into this riveting topic about the use of profanity and spirituality and how all of that stuff ties in. So first, I have been working on this Sweet Maduro cigar by PD Cigars in Stockbridge, Georgia, hand rolled right in Stockbridge. So I'm working on that, and my beverage of choice today is I'm having a Four Roses bourbon. So my Sweet Maduro, my Four Roses, I'm ready to roll. I'm gonna hand it off to Nikki right here and let her introduce herself. We're gonna go around and then jump into this discussion.
Yeah, I'm Nikki Hardiman. Glad to be here with everybody again today. I work at McAfee School of Theology, Mercer University's McAfee School of Theology. And today I've got the same combo I had a couple of weeks ago. I'm smoking a Nasty Freedom, and I've got my Uncle Nearest Tennessee whiskey with a little honey and lemon in it.
Nice.
Hey folks, this is Byron Randall. Last time I neglected to tell you that I'm on the team at the faith community.
Yeah.
Here it is, I want to make sure I tell you that. But I'm smoking a Davidoff Churchill, which is one of my favorite smokes. And Nikki has influenced me this go round. And I am drinking this Uncle Nearest mixed with a little honey and with a little lemon juice in there. And Karima's doing the same thing, or she gave me this idea.
That was my man.
It was
before.
her
I got
original.
a new love of this now.
So I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave it alone. But yes, that's what I'm drinking. And so I'm glad to be here with us on episode 3. Episode 3. One for the Father, one for the Son, and one for the Holy Ghost.
Or the Holy Smokes.
The Holy Smoke, yeah. I like
There
it.
you go.
I see what you did there.
All right, Greg DeLoach here with Mercer University School of Theology, called McAfee School of Theology. And my side hustle is I still preach on Sundays. I've got a great congregation about an hour outside of Atlanta that I serve. It's part of my DNA. I love being a part of the local communities of faith. We're all struggling together, and I am smoking a Nica Rustica or Rustica. I think I'm giving it the Italian pronunciation. So anyway, and I am joining with the Baptist preacher Elijah Craig and his good bourbon that he distilled originally in the 18th century. So he had a side hustle too from his church job. All
Not
right.
many ministers without one.
That's exactly right. Love this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Kingmaker.
Yes, I'm the Kingmaker from Vance Cross, native of Atlanta, pastor, marketplace master, and focused on operating at the highest level purpose. I am smoking along with our founder and leader, Shopkins.
Yes, sir.
I'm Grayson Hester.
The Pun King.
That's me, the pundit.
See?
Hey, you can't help himself. Can't help himself.
Yeah.
It's in your DNA.
Grayson,
It is.
the pundit.
The pundit.
Yes, my name is Grayson Hester. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the communication director for the faith community, and I'm also a student at Mercer University's McAfee School of Theology. I am a second-year Master of Divinity student with a concentration in Christian social ethics, and I am drinking I forget the brewery, but it is a coffee stout.
Almanac.
Thank you. Almanac. Almanac coffee stout, which is basically just Guinness with a little kick to it. So happy to be here.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not sure if my mic is on. I don't think it is. Is my mic on, sir? No, it's not. Let me see what it says. Here we go. My name is Karima Akila. And it's all right, baby. We
Not to be unmiked.
Indeed. I'm the founder of the Genius School. It is a decentralized, democratic, self-directed learning environment. I'm the co-founder of Not Yet Pro, a platform that allows amateur athletes to promote themselves globally, among some other things I do, but we ain't got that kind of time. So today, what this here called the Olivia. Is what it is.
Alleviate.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my reference to the color purple right there. Olivia.
I like that.
Oliva is what I'm.
What just happened on this podcast?
So this is what I'm smoking today, and I am drinking. I go between two boyfriends before my main man of choice is the good Uncle Nearest. See, with a slide of honey and a dash of lemon. But today. It is.
Today, the third episode.
Indeed. For number 3, Highlands makes the best.
Yes.
The absolute best.
Yes.
Yeah.
Old fashioned.
Indeed.
Yes, it
So they
does.
smoke this bad boy just right and so.
Yes,
You know,
No.
yes, they do.
No ageism in this group.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes. And just for the
Old-fashioned.
record, even though my name is Karima Akila, but for today's purposes, I shall be channeling my grandma.
All
Her
right.
name was Miss Geraldine Lanier,
Yes.
otherwise known as Miss Jerry.
Miss Jerry.
She called me
It's
Miss
so-
Jerry today.
All right, Miss Jerry.
I also have a grandmother named Geraldine.
No, wait.
Hey now.
Wow. Fine time.
There's a lot of different words used in Scripture. It's translated curse. It means to bring harm or wish harm to another.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, that changes how you use the word. Because a word ultimately is just a word. But we all know, I think Nikki's going to go there eventually, words have power.
Yeah.
Right? And so that power can be to curse, to bring harm to another. It can also be to bring life to another. So some can be life-giving speech when it opens up. So, but it can also be debilitating, right?
Yeah.
Whether to the self or to a neighbor, person like that.
Yeah.
So, I think, in addition to what everyone else has said, with my relationship with God, I'm with Karima that God desires the me that God created and not the me that I think I need to be.
Indeed.
And so the me that I am is a me whose anger and frustration may only best be communicated in that moment, not as a curse, to use Kurt Vance's dialectic.
You already knew. A preemptive dollar.
Right. But to express honestly. But I think it also is a statement on God that I'm not going to limit my communication based on what the French did in 1066.
Okay.
Talk to us.
Give us more, Grayson.
So the Battle of Hastings.
Battle of Hastings. Oh,
Yes.
Lesson
I
today.
was just reading about that. Hey, go on.
The Battle of Hastings is sometimes known as the battle that changed the English language, and I can't remember the particulars or the details of it, but essentially it introduced into English French as the privileged, desirable language of business and commerce. And so it was a classist way of separating who was French and who was less than. And so when people say, pardon my French, it's a way of communicating that crap became a word that more privileged, noble people were using, and shit was a word that the lower classes used and was profane because it was the lower classes using it.
Wow.
And
so, and that's good because the New Testament is in the Koine Greek, the common Greek. And when I was coming along, in seminary, it was also roughly called the gutter Greek.
Right.
It was the Greek of the working class, the Greek of the people, and it was coarse.
Right.
So wait a minute.
Which is why, and I'm gonna get to you. Which is why the first day in Greek class, my professor put on the board scubala, which was a word that Paul used, which roughly translates into shit. Because Paul was of the people speaking the people's Greek.
Wow. So are you saying now that as we look at the word profanity, it's literally a differentiation of lower class and upper class, not so much the term, but the class?
Historically, yeah.
So when you are looking at this without understanding classical patristic or Koine, you are now helping people.
That's $5 in the jar.
$3.
I'm gonna put $1 for it.
Patristic and Koine?
No, wait a minute, he said that.
No,
But he explained it.
Not really.
There you go.
Different types of Greek language.
Okay.
So within that, we're really breaking down the fact that our mistake.
Take $1 from it. There you go.
Our mistake is misunderstanding the context of the gospel. Going back to what Christian would always say: anytime you take a text out of context, all you got left is a con. We've conned people in our Western culture into believing that the word is the focus as opposed to the class that the word applies to.
I would even go further than that and say it's the interim agreement.
Oh.
It is based upon whatever this group of people deem at that time that this word means.
Yeah. So now we're going back to session or episode 1, helping people to understand that the main thing that we're helping people to break down is the fact that sometimes we've pretty much culturalized our canon to demonize people, as opposed to help people understand the real context of what it was saying. Even before we get to the Bible, this is just history. So now we've taken history, not understanding history, applied it to biblical context, and then put people in a minimized state simply because it makes us feel comfortable.
And the last thing I'll say, not to dominate time though, is that there's a reason why it's profanity, right? There's the distinction between the sacred and the profane.
Right.
So the profane necessarily is that which is not sacred. And so if the reviled people, the less than, the underclasses, are using profanity, then it's just another way of justifying whatever the upper classes are doing to them by deeming them as not sacred.
Wow, I want to let Myron and Nikki jump in here on this real quick.
First thing I like to say is this shit is bananas. That's the first thing. But secondly, I want to go back to the original question where you said, how does this affect my relationship with God? And I want to reverse the question and say, how does this affect God's relationship with me?
Come on.
Because I didn't start my relationship with God. God started this relationship with me. And so when he found me in the shape and the condition that I was in. And so he redeemed me or did whatever he did for me based on his love for me, not my love for him. So it doesn't affect our relationship because he knew this about me when he found me. And I want to suggest that if you think what I do damages the relationship, maybe you don't have a strong enough God. Right? Maybe your idea of divinity is not strong enough. Because if me saying 2 words damages my relationship, maybe the cross is not continually efficacious in my behalf.
Come on.
I'm gonna take this.
And then you said efficacious.
There we go. There you go. All right, Nikki, it's all you. It's all you.
You know what, I think about this conversation about language and the way that we use it. What I know is language is power. And whoever gets to speak their voice is the one who has power. And I also think that that words, and there are particular words that carry a lot of power. We have used words to demonize and hurt people. We have used the word queer to hurt people in the past. And that particular community has reclaimed that word to empower themselves.
Right.
Well, don't talk about reclaiming words, because I got a favorite.
Right. Well, and I was going to say, we've got, there is a particular word that begins with an N that we have used to demonize and hurt a whole group of people. But then that group has also taken that word and reclaimed it for their own uses, right? And so I think
Nikki
that
can't say this, so I'm gonna say it for us.
right. I was like, I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it.
That's what she said.
Because I'm black.
What she meant.
That's right. But it's not my word to reclaim.
Right.
Because people who look like me have used that word
You got it.
to hurt people who don't look like
And
me.
another word that
ER.
another word that only I can say in this space is faggot, and that's another word that
There's another word,
queer
absolutely.
people
Exactly.
are
Absolutely.
really claimed. But yeah,
Absolutely. So words.
Is that right? I'm sorry.
some of us. That's another conversation. Some of us are. It's still an issue, but yeah.
Sure, and we're going to talk about LGBTQ people and the way that we interact and affirm in another conversation,
Right.
for
Yes.
sure. But the language has been used to harm, and I think that matters. And when we use words in that way, they're harmful. But the other thing that I know is that God used language to create. Right? So in the beginning was the Word,
Yes.
and the Word was with God, and God spoke, "Let there be light." This is the first thing that we have in Scripture. And so it is language that literally creates. And it is God's language. So for me, when we're talking specifically about cussing, using words that our current cultural setting has deemed as profane,
Right.
I will own, I love to cuss. Oh my gosh, like it brings joy to my
Now,
soul.
wait a minute. She said, I love to cuss. Oh my gosh.
And I think that
I'm not buying it.
no, that's important, right? Because I also understand the power. So when I was listening to some music with my children, they're middle school, elementary school age. We were listening to some music, and I said, hey, don't use those words, because they're young and they don't yet understand context. But my daughter, who's a little older, said, Mama, you say those words, right? And so then I said, okay, now it's time to talk.
Yeah.
And so we have a conversation about the power of language. We have the conversation about respecting who we're around. When you're around your grandmother, don't use those words.
Right.
Right? Because I don't think she's ever uttered one of those words in her life. And at the same time, if you hurt yourself, you stub your toe, and a word comes out, you're not going to get in trouble in my house.
And what word would that be, Nikki?
Well, shit, damn, whatever kind of happens to come out when that happens,
Son of a
right?
biscuit.
Son of a biscuit, right?
Biscuit.
So I tell them that, but I also say we use these words sparingly, because when we overuse them, they lose their power.
Right.
Right?
Man, that's good.
And I also tell them, if I ever hear you using a word like that to hurt another human being, you will be in the doghouse, and you'll hear a few words from me.
So that's when a cuss becomes a curse.
That's right.
When a
Absolutely.
cuss becomes a curse.
Absolutely. But there is so much joy and delight, personally, in using a cuss word appropriately when it is exactly the word that is the situation requires. There's also just something about finding the right word for whatever it is you're trying to describe, right? I had a friend who was Japanese, and she said she came to the United States and she learned English very well. She did a great job, and then she said, "Why do y'all only use pretty? You have this word beautiful. You should use that word more." And she helped us to understand that there's such a multiplicity of words that we can use. Multiplicity.
Okay.
Which, do we have like a syllable limit here?
No.
Right?
Multiplicity is
All right,
Multiplicity is good.
But I think there's so many.
We have a bright audience
here. But there's something wonderful about finding the right language to describe whatever it is we're going on. And sometimes there are things in our world that are happening that are profane.
Yes.
And so profane language to describe those things
matters. That's right.
I want to address a couple of things in a short window. So, number one, I had that same conversation with my daughter when she was about 1.
Yeah.
Because I use curse words and cuss words, and she had been using them around her grandmother or the women, and because of my encounter and just my authority in her life, not minimizing the authority of the women in her life, she wouldn't use them around me. So I'm in the bathroom with her, and I said, I heard you've been using these words. Let me help you understand. And I said all of the words that could be offensive.
Right.
And I said, you can't use these words. Why? Not because they are not good words, but they have a age or authority limit to them. And once I let her know these are words that adults use and they have to place them properly, I have never had a problem with her using them again, because I took the allure away from her. Number two, me and Christian had a conversation, and what you'll realize is some of the words that we call cuss words have a beneficial dynamic in a conversation, and words that are not cuss words can have a degradation dynamic in a conversation, because I can use words that are cuss words that will be complimentary to you.
Terms of endearment.
Right. Absolutely.
Bernie Mac has a whole segment in Kings of Comedy where he shows how one word can have multiple contexts to it when you're changing the grammatical context.
Like you the shit versus you a piece of shit.
Right.
Okay. Right. Absolutely.
The third thing about it is, I think we minimize the beauty of the artistic dynamic of the English language, because I can say something that a curse word or cuss word will convey better than a non-cuss word.
That's right.
And until we embrace the reality of the fact that these in the right places affect people positively, and then the same words that are not cuss words or not foreign or not negative can now be used in the regular grammatical text, and I can degrade you, be degraded, or feel uncomfortable. It allows us to realize that my relationship with Christ, my relationship with God, is about how I place them, not what I say in the terminology or the inflammation of the word.
Because if I were to go up to Greg and say, man, you're so articulate, it'd be fine. But if I didn't know Christian, or if I didn't know Myron, or if I didn't know Crevance, and I know where you're going. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've usually heard it with men, but yes,
that's a great example.
And I'd say, Crevance, you were so articulate.
That's degrading to me.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes a curse, but it's not a cuss.
Right. And I think we got to be careful of that, because saying that to me from a white guy says that, am I not supposed to be articulate because of who I am? And it is literally, he hadn't used a cuss word, but he cursed me.
Yeah, but they say you're cheering so clean.
That wasn't supposed to be clean.
That's so clean.
I had people walk up to me and say, your daughter is such a nice young lady. I mean, she's so articulate. She is such a really good kid. She didn't act up. Is she supposed to?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You don't say that to another race.
So I want to say this and then pivot real quick. When I was graduating from the 5th grade, talking about cursing, I was graduating from the 5th grade, and my teacher was calling me up to get my certificate. And he said, I want to call up this next student who was such a pleasant surprise.
Ooh. Wow.
Because when he first was introduced to my class, I was a little bit worried that he might be a problem, but he was one of the best students I had. Wow. And I was like, what the hell about me said to you upon meeting me that I was going to be a problem?
Curse.
Wow.
And he cursed me. He thought he was giving me a compliment, but he was cursing me in that moment.
It wasn't a blessing, it was a curse.
Yes.
The funny thing about it, my mom always reminds me as I become more successful in life, she said, I wish I could find the band parent, because I was in marching band in elementary school, and there was a parent that came to her when I became an adult, and she told her, we didn't think he was going to be anybody. The word out was he wasn't going to make it, and we're so shocked that he became successful. She looked like me. She was a black parent as well. But in that statement, she had categorized me based off of where I came from and had cursed me before I'd even realized it and had never used a cuss word.
Yeah.
And it's not just race. It's not race outside of race. You can curse people in your race and not use a cuss word. So I think we got to be careful as Christians maximizing the authority of a 4-letter word while minimizing the authority of words that have multiple syllables all the time.
So question, when Jesus called them a brood of vipers, in my modern day language, is that not him calling them a bunch of MFers?
I mean,
Is that not the same thing?
is that true?
Brood of vipers, that's not mauve. That's not what I mean.
Let me mull over that one. But, I will say
it's
this.
hard to think a little bit.
I think
there.
contextually, he was not being nice or pleasant.
Right.
I mean, I'm serious. I mean, he was not. Yeah, he was not being nice or pleasant. So whatever.
That
whether
was meant
it
to be a little dig right there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And I think that points to the use of a 4-letter word, that we can use it as an exclamation point.
Yeah.
They didn't understand that he was talking to them
Until he said
you
that.
brood of vipers, right?
Right.
And then he got their attention. And he was able to communicate the message.
And even in that dynamic, it's not a 4-letter word, it's a 5-letter word.
You got it.
But Jesus is talking to a woman. And he literally, she's hungry.
right.
Yes.
And he
Yes.
says to her, I can't give the crumbs to dogs.
Yes.
Well, in that context,
Can't give the
you
bread.
realize she's a female. He's referred to her as a dog. The word, from a grammatical standpoint, is a bitch.
Yeah.
Say so.
This is a female dog. It's not a curse word. It's a gender description of a canine.
And really, in that context, it was a racial slur.
It was a racial slur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we can't take these things out of going back to Christian again. We can't take them out of context because you can apply that, and many people will try to preach around the fact that's not what he said. But I don't care how you exegete it. He literally
So
just
what does
referred to
exegete mean?
Oh man, that's
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
So
You need a lot
put
of-
$1 in this jar and then explain what does exegete
Because
mean,
we didn't
Kermit?
use that a lot. I bet.
Yeah.
Don't act like you forgot.
y'all messed up my microphone by
Bitch better have my money.
in its basic context, it's looking at a passage, pulling out what's in there that everybody else didn't see.
Gotcha. That's
So
what exegete means.
you're pulling away, you're exiting out of it the context of what you saw. Unfortunately, we exegete cuss words in Western culture in a way that in its grammatical text from an Eastern culture was
Exactly.
not actually being designed to be stated.
Yeah.
And I think we inflame stuff and make it Christian when it wasn't.
So I want to say this: words do not have any inherent value.
Right.
Words do not have any inherent
They do
value.
not.
They have the value we ascribe to them.
Interim agreement.
So a great example of that is a story that I read in the book about a pastor who was going over to the UK to do some ministry. He took his wife with him. When they got to the airport in the UK, their host picked them up, and it was the UK pastor and his wife picking up the guests. So the American woman, when she was getting in the car, she said, "I'm gonna just sit my fanny down in the back." So I mean, fanny is a regular word for us. Nobody,
Especially in America.
Yeah, I mean, we got Fannie Lou Hamer. Like her name was Fanny.
The other day I
Right?
bought a fanny pack.
A fanny pack, right?
You got-
Fanny in our
I'm saying
culture.
too much.
I didn't buy no fanny pack.
They're coming back.
That was a joke.
Byron, they're coming back.
So Fanny in our culture does not have any type of profane value, but in UK culture, and they speak the same language, but in UK culture, fanny is a derogatory term for a woman's genitalia. So in their culture, fanny is equal to pussy for us.
Hey.
You're just using the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, fuck is not a big deal. And people in like Scotland and
Yes.
Ireland say cunt all the time.
Right, and here it's one, especially with white people. Like y'all hate that word.
Yeah.
Like I didn't hear the word cunt until I was like,
I didn't know what that was.
I didn't know what it meant. Right?
Really?
Oh yeah.
It's just
that's
like arse. Arse in the British context is the parallel to ass.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we don't use that word at all
That's Old
in
English.
English. In American English.
Right.
So it's, again, the big piece is whatever word you have, until you put some power behind it,
Right.
it doesn't mean anything. And I think we put so much power behind words that really don't mean anything that we've embraced it for whatever reason in Christianity as you are not being Christian. And I think that's the biggest issue I have with Christianity, is we give power to stuff that God hasn't given power to.
Yeah.
Alright.
So I wanna like finish that and then pivot to some scripture real quick, because in that story when she used the word fanny, the UK pastor's wife was so offended. She was uncomfortable the entire ride.
Yeah.
And they couldn't figure out why she was so uncomfortable. And she's like, "Did you hear the word she just used?" I'm like, well, I just said fanny. That's a regular word.
Right.
But to her it was offensive because she had ascribed a profane value to the word fanny. So here's my question, right? Let's look at scripture, because I know there's somebody listening to this or watching this who is like, well, you guys haven't dealt with what the text says, and the Bible is very clear on this matter. One of the particular scriptures that people will reference will be Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, where Jesus is speaking, and he says, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth.
Yes.
This defiles a person. So how do you take your perspective on profanity and tie it to this text that says what comes out of the mouth of a person is what defiles them?
All right. So I'm going to bring a little more scripture to the table in order to talk about this. So one of the things that I was thinking about as we were preparing for this is we have the Ten Commandments, and one of those is do not take the Lord's name in vain.
Right.
And we have a particular way, and I'm not going to even use the word here because it's so divisive, but if you're going to say it shorthand, it's GD, right? Like if you use that.
Those are my initials too,
They,
by the way.
they are your initials. You are correct.
And I'm gonna let you talk.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I do not ever use my initials when I sign off on an email. You know, some people.
Right.
GD is
I
just.
would have never put that together.
I know that
That's
people
too much
do.
work.
People
But
do.
people
I know.
because of
Yeah.
the culture that we live in,
Yeah.
right? Where people are so very sensitive to that. But I think we've narrowed, right, the use of that to those two words. That taking the Lord's name is vain is using those two words put together side by side. But what about when we use God to justify behavior that hurts other people?
Say it.
Right? Like we are taking the Lord's name in vain.
Like that person must
if
be
we're
in hell.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Or if we ascribe action to God that doesn't, that God has nothing to do with. So we'll go way back in time. The Crusades. You know, these were Christians who were going to war for God. But that's taking the Lord's name in vain because you're causing harm in the name of God. And so I think that for me, if the words that come out to the Matthew passage, if the words that come out of my mouth are harmful to others, then I'm violating that passage. And so that includes respecting those I'm around.
Yeah.
And that includes how I use words to harm other people.
I use my language to marginalize
Right.
somebody else.
Yes. Or to set you apart in a marginalized, set you apart in that negative
To
way,
stereotype,
to put you on the outside, make you different. Then I am violating that passage.
And one could argue that Christianity, since the year 300, when it became the religion of the Roman Empire, Christianity itself is taking the Lord's name in vain. It has been.
Okay, unpack that. Let's just go to that. You want to unpack that a little
So
more.
unpack it in 90 seconds or less. Go.
Siri. Hey Siri.
Go.
Okay. Just essentially the fact that many African theologians today use the maxim when the white man came to Africa, and I'm paraphrasing, they had the Bible and we had the land. And when they left, we had the Bible and they had the land.
Yeah.
And so just the whole Western project of colonization, just imperialism, all of these things under the banner of the cross, using God's name in vain for vain purposes, for selfish purposes, for idolatrous purposes, idolizing idol purposes. That has been the case since Constantine in 300, co-opted this religion and made it the imperial religion, which it is still today. And so Christianity could be the Lord's name in vain.
It's just vexing me because I've never thought about it that way, Nikki, and the way you just said it, Grayson. So the greatest cussing as a black man is how colonizers from a white context have used God to enslave black people.
Yes.
Right.
And
Jesus.
And Jesus. And it is, I think it just weighed on me in a way I hadn't thought about. That as a black man in America, white people through colonization have been cussing me all my life. And we don't talk about it. And I have to be honest with you, hearing you say it hurt me in a way that I've never ever thought about. And I don't want you to, no negative, but I've never, using the Lord's name in vain and cuss words, I'd rather you cuss at me than to use the Lord's name in vain and curse me the way the Bible through the white lens have cussed at me the whole time. And we don't talk about this, and I think that's another big thing about Holy Smokes, the faith community, and my relationship with you, is that if I hadn't had a cigar, if I hadn't had a bourbon or a cognac, I would look at this in an oppressive state of what is free to me from my vocabulary that has bound me from my Christian perspective in Western culture as black man in America. And that's a hard reality.
Yeah, it's very difficult. So what I want to do is I want to give 3 people 90 seconds and then we're going to wrap it up. I want Karima to give us 90 seconds of whatever's on her mind, and then Greg, and then Myron, and then we're going to wrap up real quick.
So my 90 seconds. Lately, my children, I have 6 of them all together.
6?
Yes, sir. God has been good. God bless my family. All right. God bless the family.
All right, I'm not coming back to this anymore.
My 6 kids. Come on back. They range in age between 21 down to 9. And so I've noticed that my younger children, I cuss, right? And I learned cussing from my grandmother, Miss Jerk, right? First word I ever said was shit, right? Because that's how she said shit. She was from 2 syllables, right? So I grew up cussing, right? So my children now are asking the question, is this something that is appropriate for them? Can they now use this language? And they literally asked me, can I use, cuss words? And so I explained the same thing to them. This is just a word that this group of people have deemed to have this meaning and significance. So as long as you understand who you're talking to, and as long as you understand how you will be perceived, then that is all that matters. Use wisdom in any and all language. Use wisdom in any all language, in any all context. So now it is, I'll be honest, it is still a little unnerving. One of my younger teens has his Instagram page, and he has some spicy language on there. Thank God my daddy ain't got that, he ain't on Instagram, praise Jesus. But, I have to also honor the freedom that I've given them. Because that's the freedom that God gives me.
I want to let, well, you know what? Wrap up again real quick, Karima, what you were saying about the use of profanity, your kids, God bless your family, so on and so forth.
Wrap that up right there.
Yeah. Please, real quick.
Just that I've expressed to my children that these words only have the power that this group of people have ascribed to them. And as long as they understand, so I've given them the freedom to use them. But I've also have given them the context in which they should be used, and to understand the wisdom and understand how they will be perceived when certain circles hear them. So when I was growing up, my friends and I would cuss, and we knew amongst each other that was what we did. But then I remember riding the buses in Philadelphia. If an older person got on the bus, we would quiet that down because we knew and understood that to their ears it would seem disrespectful. So I just wanted my children to understand. You may use these words, understand the meaning and power behind them, and other cultures have created other words that have different meanings. So as long as you have wisdom with anything that you say and you understand how it will land for the other person, that's all.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
If it's okay, I'm gonna yield my time. I'm good. I've really.
Real quick though. because you said something when we were on break about these different words that mean different things in different contexts. Share again the whole napkin concept.
Well, I mean,
and
you know,
how,
to your point about fanny and all of that, there's a handful of language words rather that are the same English language, because it's in a different context, will be captured differently. So napkin in England is a word that refers to tampon. So you don't ask for a napkin when you're in England, because that conveys differently. It also refers to diapers, I think, as nappies. They'll call diapers that. The term faggot is a word that originally refers to kindling or wood, and it's also a word that's used for cigarettes. So even in America, you can go back decades where the term faggot would refer to, give me a faggot, which was mean a smoke. Now, I don't know the historicity if this is actually true or not.
historicity?
No. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The historical origins. I don't know how pure what I'm about to say is, but I had picked up along the way that that burning gay men and women and others at the stake, the term faggot was derived from the wood that was used, the faggots that were used to burn became then the word appropriated to describe people of different sexual orientation.
And one thing, and
So,
this isn't a disagreement. I'll just say refutation. But in addition to that, faggot was a term used for basically spinsters, women who were like haggard and would have to walk and
old and gnarly.
Old and gnarly. And
Right.
so there's also a sexist component to it too.
Yeah.
Where it was that woman is not producing children, that woman is not serving her social purpose, and therefore this is a slur for her that, in addition to what you were talking about, also made its way into making fun of, denigrating those men who, that the prevailing understanding of them was they had an inverted sexuality, that was, they have a feminine spirit trapped in a male body, and so it was a female slur used to attack someone they deemed as female. Just
right,
and
and we've talked about this in Holy Smokes in the past. I'm really just in the last couple of years still working on being comfortable with the terminology of queer,
right?
Because my generation, that was the pejorative term, that was the bad word. that was the word that you used to curse a person, and so right.
Alright. I think I want to bust a myth in my 90 seconds, right? And it's that just because...
Wait a minute. Walk your ass.
Okay, watch your ass. My ass here. Cover your ass. My myth is this, that just because I use a 4-letter word, I'm less intelligent. Right? Because sometimes I've chosen to use that word to clear the noise to make a statement. I've been a public speaker since I was about 8 years old. And I remember speaking to a group of young people where I was not breaking through. I was doing a lot of talking, but they weren't hearing it because of the noise that was in their head. And so I chose to use a 4-letter word in the middle of the speech. And immediately the ears popped up. Right? I had the audience when I didn't have the audience before. In that way, I rescued that audience as opposed to cursing that audience, because they could get the message, because I made a choice to use a prerogative term as opposed to let it go without them hearing my message. I put an exclamation point at the end.
You mean pejorative?
A pejorative, thank you.
Right?
But it's just
a bad word.
It was his prerogative to drop the J.
So, I mean, it's not that I was less intelligent. I just made a choice. And it was for the sake of being a communicator to get my message across. Sometimes you got to clear the noise.
So I want to say this.
Then I'm gonna hand it over to Nikki to give us the final word. When we talk about this concept of cussing versus cursing, that's something that I've talked about for a couple of years now, because you can curse someone without using a cuss word. And you can cuss at someone without cursing them. You know, everybody in this circle I consider a friend. I think I have cussed at and with pretty much everybody in the circle. Especially with me and Kervance, as far back as we go, we cuss at each other all the time. But it has never been used as a way to demean each other, but it is a part of our camaraderie. It's a part of our friendship. So sometimes I might cuss at Kervance, and it might be one of the most complimentary things I've said to him. Whereas with somebody else, if I use the cuss word, it might be offensive. So I use the wisdom, like Karima said, to recognize this is not the place for me to use this kind of language, not because it's sinful, but because it's inappropriate. And we got to understand the difference between what is sinful and what is inappropriate. So cussing versus cursing helps us to understand that. And many people in religious spaces have been cursing people for centuries, for decades, for years, without using one cuss word. And we have to understand you can curse somebody without using a cuss word. And you can cuss with somebody, given the context, without cursing them. So I want to let Nikki give us the final word, and then we're going to be done.
Yeah. This has been such a good and fruitful conversation. It feels so good to be with people who care about language, right?
Yeah.
And so as I kind of think about this conversation, and I definitely come to this context with as a mom. I'm a mom and a minister, and when I talk to my children, I tell them, if you hear a word and you don't know what it means and you think it's a cuss word, you come and tell me what that word is. You are allowed to say that word to me, and then we'll talk about what it means. We'll talk about where it came from. We'll talk about how people use it age appropriately. Like those conversations progress for sure. I remember my daughter came to me with, and she said, "I've got a word, Mom." I said, "What is it?" She said, "Fuck." I said, "Oh wow, yeah, that's a lot coming out of your mouth." It's a little, right? Like it jarred me. It jarred me. But we talked about it. And I said, this is a creative word. You're going to learn about it as we go along. And I don't want you using it right now because it's too much for you to understand.
Yeah.
Right? But what I think the wholeness of what we've talked about here today is the words that come out of our mouth need to be blessing.
Yeah.
And sometimes blessing is offering a proverbial attaboy or attagirl, right? Like just pumping somebody up. But sometimes it's naming in truth what something is, maybe using those 4-letter words and calling it out and saying that's bullshit. And when we say, right, and if there's something that's happening that's hurting a friend and we say that's bullshit, that is blessing, because we are finding a way to say this is not good, and what you're doing, whether you're using 4-letter words or not, what you're doing is profane. Come on. And it is against what God wants for us. And when I call it bullshit, that is in accordance with what God wants, because I'm naming what is profane. And to call it bullshit is the right word, because to say that's wrong doesn't get across what I'm saying. Stop your shit right now. Stop it right now. Because I don't want it anymore. So I don't know if that's what you want for a wrap up, but that's what I got.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So the wrap up from Nikki is let's stop the bullshit.
Bullshit.
So this is Holy Smoke, Cigars and Spirituality, episode 3. Thank y'all so much for bringing some context to this conversation. And we'll see you all next time for episode 4 of Holy Smoke, Cigars and Spirituality. That's all right.
Good deal.
Family, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Now here's what I need you to do. Share this with somebody that you love. Whether it be your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your friends at work, your pastor, share it with somebody. Spread this goodness as far as you possibly can. And then also, thank you again for supporting us on Patreon. We're going to continue to bring you as much content as we possibly can. So, if you have any ideas for topics that you would like for us to cover in future episodes, please send those to us. You can message us on Patreon. You can also hit up our DMs on Instagram. That's at Holy Smokes Movement. Or you can shoot us an email at holysmokes@thefaithcommunity.org. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next time right here on Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality.